Hello, writers and readers. I'm freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow, here with my weekly video about writing, editing, and the writing life. On my YouTube channel, I post one video every month where I review a book on writing craft or other tool or resource for authors. For 2025, I've been reviewing books and resources specifically on story structure. This month, we're reviewing the writing craft book, Structuring Your Novel, Essential Keys for Writing an Outstanding Story, and its related workbook, all by K.M. Weiland. I really like K.M. Weiland. I'm a big fan of her writing craft books and her Helping Writers Become Authors website. The approach in this book is mostly a series of questions about your story, its plot, your characters, and their growth arcs, asking you to think about them in a big picture order first. I think it would be most useful for writers that I would like to call reluctant plotters, or people who really want to plot but don't have plotting hard-coded as part of their DNA. Many are former pantsers who are tired of revising their stories that wander about and having to leave half of it on the cutting room floor because it didn't really fit, but who get hives about thinking about matching their stories to a beat sheet like The Hero's Journey, Romancing the Beat, or Save the Cat. To be clear, you can use Structuring Your Novel workbook or the craft book with a beat sheet structure, but you can also benefit from this, especially if the outline you produced has left your story feeling a bit flat and that you need to explore some more dimensions to it. Just like the snowflake method that I talked about a few months back on my YouTube channel, this one starts super high level and it works into greater and greater depths as you go. It starts by focusing on your story's hook and its unique angle that will draw readers in. And to help readers find their story's hook, Weiland challenges writers to hone their story's hook and point readers to the first story question. It's more specific than what's happening here and is why your readers will keep reading. Some examples she gives are, what scary reptilian monster just killed the worker? That's the story question in Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. How does a city hunt? That's the story question raised in Mortal Engines by Philip Reeve. And who is the one child who will never grow up? That's Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. I added a few. Can a young woman find love when people in her place in society marry for financial security? That's Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And what if a DNA test could find your one perfect match? That's The One by John Marrs. This book and workbook ask a series of questions to help writers find a compelling hook for their story, and then gives checklists for how to introduce your hook without beating your readers over the head with it. She advises, don't just tell readers what's going on, give them enough information so that the readers will start asking questions. I like to call these questions the story questions, which are the questions that the authors want the readers to focus on, and not just, who's that? Why are we here? Because those types of questions sometimes distract readers from the real story question. The book and workbook then go on to talk about the first act, assuming a traditional 3-act structure, and has sections on foreshadowing, building important story elements into your first pages. This can be done in pre-planning. Most of this workbook is intended to be used before you actually sit down and write your first draft. You could have it in your head, you could have an outline, and you could use it to revise later. It's never too late to build a structure on your draft until you hit publish, but it really would work best in advance. The chapter on first acts also included exercises to figure out which subplots to include, which is important for people who like to do way too many subplots. I see that a lot. How to introduce characters, how to pick solid characters, introducing the stakes, and exercises and a checklist for what to include in your story setting. Weiland gave examples of 5 types of subplots: romantic, career, family, best friend, and minor character arc subplots, where she talks about Scrat's pursuit of the acorn in the Ice Age movies. I read that and I'm like, I want to rewatch all the Ice Age movies now just to see Scrat's ascendance from lone squirrel rat fighting for survival to one willing to give up his coveted acorn prize for love as the movies go along. In her characters section, she encourages authors to list their characters in alphabetical order to see if there are too many that are similar or start with the same letter. I do the same thing with editing clients when they have a large cast, as it's confusing for readers if your cast of characters sounds like the members of the Duggar family, all starting with the same letter. In the section on setting, she talks about concrete settings. Those are key elements in which the setting can only work in one place. And as an example, she has the Patriot, that the specific battle took place in South Carolina. And in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth and Darcy were fated to run into each other when Elizabeth goes with her aunt to tour the grounds at Pemberley at Mr. Darcy's fine estate. An example for me is Mark Watley is stranded on Mars in The Martian. That's a pretty important setting. It's pretty concrete. She contrasts this with what she calls throwaway scenes. And that's a scene where the setting could be anywhere. It could take place without really changing what happens in the scene or what happens to the plot. An example is where the mom and the daughter both realized that they got swapped in Freaky Friday. I thought this was a bit of a missed opportunity. I thought it would have been a lot more fun if the daughter had been at a sleepover when she wakes up and it's the mom and the daughter's body. But I digress. They could be anywhere. But Here, I disagreed with Weiland because she listed as an example, as a throwaway scene, Darcy's first proposal to Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice at the Huntsville parsonage. For those of you who haven't read my favorite novel, like I have a dozen plus times, this is when Elizabeth was staying with her friend Charlotte Lucas, who married the odious Mr. Collins, and who lived in the parsonage within sniffing distance of Darcy's miserable aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Could there be a worse setting for an ill-fated proposal? Perhaps aboard a garbage barge. I don't think that the miserable parsonage was an insignificant or throwaway setting for that scene, but I digress. After the chapter on the first act, there's a focus section on the first plot point, and then Weiland tackles exercises and questions directed of the first half of the second act, which is the character's reaction to the first plot point, culminating in the first pitch point. There's a chapter designated to the midpoint, your story centerpiece. This whole section reminded me of James Scott Bell's writing craft book, Write Your Story from the Middle, which I reviewed a couple months ago. It's the mirror image moment when the character realizes something needs to change, I need to change, and then things start to change for the protagonist. Then in Weiland's book, there's a chapter, the second half of the second act, showcasing the character's growth arc. Weiland gives some examples, like Humphrey Bogart's character in Casablanca, where before the first pinch point, he was bitter, determined not to get involved in other people's problems, and drinking a lot. But after he had that mirror moment, he learned to forgive, he grew to be willing to surrender lost love and fight for a greater cause. There are exercises and checklists and examples for the third act, the climax, and also the resolution. And then Weiland shifts into the second part with tips for revising. After you've got the developmental, the plot is solid, here's a focus on stronger scenes with scene and sequel. This is good for fans of Dwight Swaim, who wrote about scene and sequel many years ago. The book, but not the workbook, also has a section on working on stronger sentence structure. So overall, if you want a guided approach to hammering out your story structure in advance of writing, this could be your tool. It's not for diehard pantsers, as you will find it way too much before you actually start writing. But thinking through all these decisions could make writing that first draft much more efficient, with much less to do developmentally before polishing the prose. I really enjoyed reading it, and I will use some of the examples in the future with my editing clients. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. I post new content every week. This is freelance fiction editor Miranda Darrow wishing you happy writing!